Welcome back.
Welcome to Decision Space, the only show to take place right here in the space between the turns in your favorite games. I'm Brendan Hansen.
I'm Jake Friedman.
And this is the podcast about decisions in games.
And today we are reviewing Azul Summer Pavilion, a reimplementation of Azul, a classic evergreen title by Michael Kiesling.
So we covered Classic Azul, Jake, back in episode 47 of Decision Space. And I would say we both really enjoy Azul. That's one of, I would say, in that episode, we rated it very highly.
I might have given it a 10, a rare 10.
I think you did give it a 10. Yeah, it was your first 10 on the show, I believe. Which it sort of speaks for itself. It's a delightful game that has spawned a whole series. And I think for me, it was really the portal into understanding Michael Kiesling as the puzzly designer of the Kiesling and Kramer duo, that he brings this crunchy puzzliness to the decision spaces that he co-designs. And Azul is that. It's a puzzle game. It's a puzzle abstract that you are playing with other players. So maybe at some point we'll kind of talk about the heart of Azul, but this is a classic deep dive. So let's talk about our thoughts initially on Summer Pavillion up front.
But before we do that, let's read a review because we asked for reviews and we got some. So thank you all so much for sending these reviews. Please, 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 please keep them coming. It really helps our show grow. I don't really know how. I was doing some research on like, the algorithm and maybe the reviews don't necessarily just make your show get promoted more, but I think it means so much when somebody clicks on a show and they see that there's like all these reviews of it. People are like it, and especially having like recent reviews. If you click on a show and it's like the last review was sometime in like 4 years ago, you might be like, well, is it suck now? Are they still making new episodes? So it's so important, I think, that the review pipeline keeps going. So that's my appeal. Doesn't cost you anything to give us some reviews. So without further ado, this one comes from a longtime listener and friend, Varianor, who was even on a podcast, and it's titled A Review 2 Years in the Making. And it says, do you like board games? Give a listen. Do you really like board games? Give a good listen. Do you love board games? Do you love thinking about how they work? Please stop reading and start listening right away. This is a podcast where you come for the deep dives into games, the definitions about aspects in games, and the discussions or debates about board games, and you stay for the camaraderie. So thank you so much, Verinor, for that very kind review. Better late than never, certainly. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. Oh, we have to review the review, Jake. 10 out of 10.
10.
10.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Okay, Summer Pavillion. This is a less formal deep dive than our classic ones, where it's kind of a mashup format. We're going to talk about game implementations, sequels, but we still want to give it, the treatment. We want you to have context for the conversation we're going to have. So I'm going to give you my thoughts on Azul Summer Pavillion, like we would typically do, and then Jake will. I will say this, Jake, I think Azul Summer Pavillion is delightful. It's an approachable, fun, simple game that builds on the concept of Azul. In some ways, it de-teeths Azul. It takes some of the mean moments that you have with people getting stuck with a hot potato of negative points or even potentially, I think it mostly takes out those mean moments, really having someone be the loser at the table in a given round. And I think in its place, you get a more forward planning rich game in which strategic decision making is emphasized even more than tactical decision making. And Azul was already a fairly strategic game in terms of thinking about the pace and the flow. For me, Azul Summer Pavillion is delightful, but I think it's a continuation of the high point of Azul and doesn't quite reach that high watermark for me, but I love it. If you enjoy Azul, there's no reason not to play Azul Summer Pavillion, especially if you feel like your copy of Azul is maybe a little long in the teeth, or if you want something that's a little bit thinkier, a little bit where you can make round to round decisions where you're thinking more than 1 or 2 rounds ahead with all of the tiles in play. In the first Azul, maybe you plan ahead for 1 color, maybe 2, but here you're really making strategic decisions about all the colors. So I like Azul Summer Pavillion. I don't know if we're doing numbers, but my number is 8. I think it's a good one. I like it.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I'm way colder than you on Azul
Okay.
Summer Pavilion. I think it's just like a worse version of Azul, I think, in almost every way. So I'm going to come across in this episode, I'm seeing the future as being quite critical of this game. However, it's pleasant. It's just like, above all else, pleasant. You can't really have a bad time playing this game. It's kind of like a Domino's pizza, right? It's like, I love pizza, and I'm gonna have a good time when I'm eating pizza, whether it's from Domino's or Pizza Hut or wherever, uh, you know, relatively cheap American pizza chain. But it's not like the high, it's not like a pizza that you'd get in Italy, in an actual like awesome, pizza oven made to perfection with like great quality ingredients. I think that's the analogy I'm going with. Azul Summer Pavilion is the Pizza Hut to like whatever your favorite local pizza spot is, wherever you live in the world. So it's like a 6. It's pleasant, but it's just kind of a worse knockoff of the original.
Dang. Okay, maybe eight's too high.
I mean,
feel like
it's tough.
I really like it. It's nice. It's not a bad game.
I've had fun playing the game, but I think for me, and we'll talk more about this, like you hit the nail on the head when you say it's been like detooth, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have the kind of punchy moments ever that Azul has, right? Round to round, where you're really like, oh, I need to make certain I'm not taking massive penalties. I really care about the types and colors of tiles that I'm getting this round. That's almost totally stripped out of Azul Summer Pavilion. I think you just want to get as many tiles as you can, basically, and then play them in a way that feels pretty intuitive.
So you feel like heuristically it's not even that interesting. You're not making as the same compromises, or the spatial puzzle is just not as novel. There's really no spatial puzzle. In Azul, there's a nice little spatial puzzle with how the tiles slot in, and that's gone for the most
totally
part.
Gone. Yeah. There are definitely tiles like that you're kind of like wanting more than other in a given round, but nowhere near the same extent of in base Azul, where it's like somebody takes the blue tiles right away and you're like, no, like I needed that. In Azul Summer Pavilion, you just never really, or I just never feel that way. There's definitely skill in this game, but I think you have to like really look hard and go to some not very fun decision space places to like get to higher levels of skill, to a point where it just doesn't make sense to engage with this game in that way. So I'll leave my thoughts there at this segment of the show, and maybe we give like a really quick background of the game.
Yeah. Long ago, Michael Kiesling made Azul in 2017, and it was really, really good. So the company that published it, which is Next Move Games and Plan B Games, decided that they should make more Azul, which was great. So then they released,
smart move,
very smart move, Azul Stained Glass of Sintra in 2018, which was a well-received follow-up. That is not what we're talking about today. We're talking about Azul 3 Summer Pavilion, which came out just 1 year later in 2019, and then followed by Azul Queen's Garden in 2021. I'm sure this is not the last we will hear of Azul, but I just wanted to sort of contextualize it within the history of Azul games, that this is the third game. Jake, you've played all of them. Would you just quickly give your characterization of each of them for listeners? Like, Summer Pavilion evokes a lightness that I think this game has for the series.
Right. I've only played the Stained Glass of Sintra one once at a con, and I really enjoyed it. So I don't have much to say about that one, though I have fond memories of playing it once.
Can I interject really briefly to say the only thing I know about that game is that people always talk about wanting to eat the pieces, which it's like, no, don't do that. Okay, go on.
So I remember thinking it was clever. Then there's this one which we're going to talk about a ton, which feels like the most like open and soft. It's like the kids' glove version of the game. And then there's Azul 4, Azul Queen's Garden, or as I like to call it, not Azul Queen's Garden.
Azul,
because it's totally a different game that just has like the Azul name tagged on, and is probably, tagged as a re-implementation on Board Game Geek. I'm certain it is. So just flag that if we talk a little bit more about what re-implementations are, because I feel like that one, it just moves on from the core tile selection mechanism of Azul. And I feel like if you're not doing that, then you're not really re-implementing Azul, which is where I take some tiles and the rest go into the middle.
But is Azul? Oh man, this is why we need a whole. This is gonna be the kickoff of a conversation about re-implementations and sequels in board games, because we're gonna get into a lot of meaty stuff. But I think this is a natural time to sort of talk about base Azul and then what's different about Summer Pavilion. As we kind of, if people are familiar with the original Azul, there's some key elements that reappear here. So Jake, you just mentioned the factory tile system. So Azul, historically, especially the first one, is all about drafting these tiles. There's a few factory tiles that come out. You randomly deal tiles from a bag to those factory areas using the language of the game. And then on your turn, you just pick one of them and you pick all of one color from that area. You add the rest to the middle, which becomes another area that players can draft from on a subsequent turn. So maybe there's 2 reds, a blue and a white in an area. If you take the 2 reds, the blue and the white go to the middle. Maybe those mix with other blues and whites and make a pool that's larger. Azul Summer Pavilion, base Azul has 5 colors of tiles. Azul Summer Pavilion mixes this up, I would say meaningfully, and moves it to 6. We're going to talk about that more. I don't like it, but it's such a small thing, but it has really big consequences for the decision space and the feel of the game.
That's so funny that you say that, because I guys be really
you didn't even
vulnerable. I did not notice that ever.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love it. And it has so in addition to that, so it still has that system. You take tiles from these locations, the rest go to the middle, sort of have this ebb and flow. But a huge difference is that you don't really get penalized for having too many tiles that you can't place in a round, which is a key feature of Azul, base Azul. There's these memorable, dramatic moments in base Azul where you'll have to take colors of a tile type that you have nowhere to place based on your previous tile placements. And in Azul Summer Pavilion, there's a new mechanism where there are stars on your board that you're filling in of these specific colors. There's not really an adjacency puzzle between colors here. There is to some extent, because you have these nice combos that we'll talk about as a key difference as well. And by combos, I mean action chains, really. If you accomplish something physically on the board, you get to take more tiles, do more stuff in a given round. That's not a feature of base Azul. But there's also a wild section where you can place tiles of any color so long as you haven't placed them already to that wild star in the middle, which ends up being this huge release valve. And then there's this shared pool of bonus tiles where when you are comboing, you're taking pieces from. Jake, do you want to talk about that combo system some, and then other key elements that you feel are different?
Yeah, basically it just has like completion bonuses on certain aspects of your personal player board. So just like Azul, you're taking tiles to sort of a storage area and in the first phase of the game, and then phase 2, you're placing from your storage area onto your personal board. However, a distinction here, which is worse in many ways, is that instead of everybody just kind of automatically resolving their boards simultaneously, you have to take turns around the table, because if you complete certain areas of your board, so like surrounding, basically filling in like 4 adjacent spaces surrounding some bonus icons, you get to take additional tiles to your supply during the placement phase from a central bonus board that just has like a refilled market of different colors of tiles.
And if you complete, there's easy bonuses where you maybe get 1 bonus tile between the wild spaces and the low value of the stars of these different colors. Then you can get double bonuses or triple bonuses where you could be taking 3 tiles a turn. But in practice, that's fairly rare.
No,
I mean, says no.
It's like the same amount of it takes the same amount of tiles to get the 3 bonus ones as it does to take a lot of the 2 bonus ones, if you think about it. Like 11 tiles.
You're right. Because of the wild. Yeah.
So, you should probably be
aiming for 3s.
Aiming for some more of those. Yeah. Just a pro tip.
Okay, moving on. I've never beaten Jake at Azul Summer Pavilion. um, other key differences, Jake.
I think I think the thing that is the big difference in, I mean, I think that's it. That basically explains the game. You keep going. There's a set number of rounds in this game, 6 rounds. At the end of the game, you get bonus points based on how well you filled out your board, just like in base Azul.
By color or by value. Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
But
exactly.
wait, there's also wild tiles. That's another important release
Oh,
valve
yeah.
that is the cushion pillow of this game, which is that every round there's a certain color of tile that is wild and can be used as any other color. This is not randomized, and it's always the same. Purple is always wild in round 1. Green is always wild in round 2. Orange in round 3. Tan, mauve, whatever, beige in round 4. Blue in 5, red in 6, etc. And I'm only saying this to state all those colors, and sort of it has that sort of dry, systematic feel, I think, of that. But it also lets you plan around and gives these different colors different values throughout the game. And you get to carry 4 tiles with you from round to round, which can be that's an important part of the forward planning. You can carry tiles forward in base Azul, but oftentimes you have to be a lot more. It's more committal in terms of the action, because you've committed to a certain spot that you're going to place them when you fill up the sort of hopper supply area that you've put it into. Whereas in Summer Pavilion, you just take them to the next round and you can decide what to do with them then. So that's yet another way that this has softened some of the decisions.
Well, in Azul, you're limited. You can only carry like a certain amount of tiles in any given row. Here, there's no constraint at all. You can have infinite tiles in your storage in any given round. In a round, right? Which you can get to a point in Azul where it's like, I can't take a red tile because I won't be able to put them into my reserve anywhere. So this just does away with that completely, which I think moves us into the decision space a little bit. And when we're talking about like the comparison to Azul and Azul Summer Pavilion, I think that's one of the things that comes through most strongly are all the various ways in which the tension in the draft portion of the game and is just completely softened. So we mentioned, I think, 4 things there. So there's the wild tiles that makes it just easier to get things done. There's the fact that you don't have any constraints on your storage area of tiles that you are able to place in that round. You have one of the areas on your board you can play any colors of tile into. That's another way that's totally softened. And
there's bonus tiles sitting out on the table that the color of, that if you can plant, there's a lot of them. There's 12 bonus tiles or more, around 12 sitting out there. So you can plan ahead and know that, in base Azul, it's a huge deal if there's a certain color that you're really planning on, and when you randomly put tiles out, if that color is not there, it could really mess you up based on that sort of planning, like we'd mentioned, Jake. And I'm going to leave maybe three blue tiles here and hope I get 2 more in a future round. If those don't come up, that's another moment where the game just punches you in the gut a little bit. Here, there's always a way out of a sticky situation.
And the 5th way that it's softened is the way that the storage works from round to round. In Azul, if you fill up a row, you have to place it right into the space. Like, you're determining when you draft the tile where it's going on your board, and this is decoupled in a kind of just, again, like it's like air coming out of a balloon. Like, by decoupling that, it just gives players too much flexibility, I think, in the placement and like the puzzle of like how to place tiles on the board then has to be really engaging and really interesting, to sort of create, I think, the tension necessary for like interesting gameplay that I want to like go back to and like dig into again and again and improve at. And I think that like the heuristics there are just like very straightforward.
And the reason for that is that in base Azul, when you're taking tiles, you have to do the value judgment of, there's so much uncertainty, because oftentimes you're not taking enough that you're filling in a row completely, right? Granted, maybe you're just trying to fill in the first row or the second row, and that's a key part of the decision making of that game. And that's interesting, that's fun. But then you have this range of, okay, really certain row one, yes, if I put a tile here, it will end up in the exact spot this round, done, right? But if I put one tile in row 3 and there's a few tiles out in base Azul, okay, there's some uncertainty, but I'll probably be able to finish it. If I put out 2 and in row 5 and there's only 2 tiles out there, I know I won't finish it, but now there's a ton more uncertainty. Will I be able to do this next round? I'm speculating yes if I place them there, but I don't know for sure. And Azul Summer Pavilion is just a way, when you're asked to make placement decisions, you're given way more certainty about those decisions, which in some ways makes them less interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, done.
So I mean,
shut it down.
There are. So I think that's one of the big difference, right?
Yeah.
And how do we say that in terms of like decision space? Like we keep using the term like softer. It's less punishing, I guess is another way to say that. And I would, what about decision space does that like relate to?
I think that there's a lot more options in Azul Summer Pavilion, right? It's more flexible especially because of the wild tiles and the wild locations, that when you're drafting all those tiles, your considerations of what could happen, you just don't have to think about as much, because oftentimes when you're jumping, let's say in Azul, you might feel like you're going to jump out a window. And you hope
there's like an anvil hanging in the air over your head, and you're like, I hope that rope doesn't
break. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in Azul Summer Pavilion, maybe there's an anvil hanging above your head.
It's like an inflatable, like blow up mallet, right?
No,
where it's like,
totally.
I'm going to bonk you with this and you'll get -1 point.
And as long as you get enough tiles, you can find a lot of directions to run, right? Mm-hmm. The strategic path through Azul Summer Pavilion is much more open to the player, whereas in Azul, it's often more narrow, and you have to do a lot more thinking about what other players might want to do to inform your decision space. That's my experience of that.
It is interesting, though, because the point, at the end of the game, at the end of the day, right, both of these games, there's going to be winners and losers.
Yep.
So the actual outcome, negative outcome in Azul is the same as the negative outcome here. Like you're going to lose. And the point spread might even be similar, because even though there's not like big negative point potential, there's just like way more point potential overall. Or maybe there's not. I don't know. But like, you could play a game of Azul, you could play a game of this, and the difference between winner and losers is, 20 or 30 points in either one. Yeah. But it just feels so much less tense as you're playing it, I guess, which of course is a pro and con. So, that'll appeal to a lot of people too. And I mean, this is a well-received game.
This is wholly speculative, right? But Azul, when it comes out, there is this reputation of, oh, that's a mean game, right? There are mean moments that feel bad moments.
I think that's it exactly. There's no way to really be mean to your opponent here.
At all. To me, this game is Michael Kiesling saying, oh, you didn't like mean Azul? This is nice Azul. I'm going to make this for you. So you take away the dramatic moments of sticking your friend with a pile of negative points where they got to put them at the bottom of the board in their row of shame and just look at them for the rest of the round going, oh, I hope I don't get more. They're going to be negative 15. And here he says, okay, that dramatic moment's gone. What type of dramatic moment could exist? Oh, I could have a dramatic moment where a player gets to place bonus tiles, get more bonus tiles, place those bonus tiles, get more bonus tiles, place bonus tiles, get more bonus tiles. It doesn't take away, it gives, right? It's the inversion of it. But to us, it feels a little bit less, it feels toothless, and it doesn't feel as exciting. But those moments can be fun for the person doing them. You
cannot succeed in base Azul without paying attention to your opponent's board.
Yeah.
And here you just,
tunnel
that's
vision.
Like another difference. You can have total tunnel vision on your own board. And I think that makes, in a way, I kind of want to move the conversation a little bit into a discussion of like where this game challenges you. And I think that is, and I alluded to this a little bit in my, kind of initial breakdown or whatever, which is like, I think where this game challenges you is also not that satisfying for me, which is that like it can get really bandwidth testing in that I think in order to play this game the best that you can and score the best points possible, right? To be to play this game, in a competitive sense, it really requires that at the start of phase 2, you look at all the pieces you've collected and map out in your head exactly where you're going to play them and in what order. And when you are, it's not as bad in the first round, but then when you're carrying over like 4 tiles from round to round, you're like looking at like, I don't know, like 14, 15 different colored tiles. And then you're also planning that you'll be, getting a couple of bonuses along the way, or maybe several bonuses late in the game. And, how are you going to like try and add all that in so that you can just eke out an extra couple of points and ensure that you're not taking any negative points at the end of the game. That's like, for me personally, totally subjective. That's not the most fun, one of the more fun aspects of gaming to me is like sitting there and just like trying to like preemptively min-max what I'm going to do in my turn. And I think to go all the way back to my first point is the difficulty in doing that is so much less here than in Base Azul, where that still exists to some extent, although it's in the front part of the game when you're drafting the tiles, because you don't have to care at all about what your opponent's doing. Like, you can just solely focus on that.
It's like arithmetic versus...
And I think it's pretty much doable too. Like, it's just like, are you going to sit there and do it? I think most people probably can.
It's like arithmetic versus
don't want to.
Algebra or something.
Right.
Or calculus.
Does that make sense? I kind of went
completely.
on a tangent there. Okay.
No, it does. And I think that you're right that one of the really nice things about Base Azul is the pacing of that game is very strong from a decision point perspective. You're asked to make interesting decisions consistently throughout. And here, the drafting ends up being a lot. It's not as exciting oftentimes because, so there's this other mechanic that we didn't totally mention around the wild colors, which is that whenever you take tiles from a location, you also can take one wild color tile from that location alongside them, but you can never gain more than one wild color tile in a turn, which means that you get this really simple heuristic for the first half of the round where you're sort of saying, okay, I need to find just the most of any color that I'm interested, that I think I'll be able to finish or at least get a good return on combos from, and a wild with it for the first half. And then by the second half, there's so many fewer tiles that the decisions are less interesting. So there's less interesting drafting decisions at the beginning, less interesting at the end. Also, I think, Jake, there's this mechanism where when you take the Base Azul, there's this criticism that it's the first player tile that you can get by drafting from the middle initially is very strong. It's really good to go first because you minimize the uncertainty of what you will have access to in the next round. You get the first pick of the next lot. Here you see that, okay, that's changed slightly, and you get negative. If you're the first person to take from the center, you get -1 point for every tile you take. But that's like all the negative points you're probably ever going to get playing Summer Pavilion. And oftentimes you'll just wait until you're getting -3. And it's still good to go first. It just doesn't feel bad. You just don't think about it. It's like, whatever. Okay.
Interestingly, it feels like a bigger deal in Base Azul, where it's just a -1 point.
Yeah.
Because it goes down.
It sits down there on your board.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Maybe, and I think that might be a part of it. Like, honestly, is that's like signposting. And the potential for more negative points are always there.
Yeah.
Right. So it feels scarier to do it, even though it's generally less of a negative thing there than it does here, where I just don't even think about it at all. Totally. I just take the tiles. I basically just take like the most tiles that I can get. Sure. That's like pretty much
hope
the
to
heuristic.
Get a wild tile with it.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Which just creates like a really uninteresting pattern of play where it's like, I can take 3 tiles, so I'll take 3, and then Brendan will take 3. And now there's only, one more where I can get 3, and then we're going to do 2. Right, exactly, until all the 2s are gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
And a huge part of that...
great from a decision space perspective.
And this game, right, the difference here is a matter of taste. This is a cozier game for people who want a cozier game that is additive and not detractive, that doesn't have the mean moments.
I was going to save this a little bit for the end when we're talking about reimplementation, but we're kind of just freewheeling here. So, like, my question for you was to be like, should this game exist if we're sitting here agreeing that it's like the Papa John's to the
Yeah.
most bomb local pizza joint that you've ever played or ever
I
had.
think
Ever
okay.
played. What's wrong with me?
I'm not going to defend Papa John's in my argument. I'm going to reject this metaphor just for now, even though I think it's a good one, this analogy, and say that yes, because this is for people who want to play Cascadia, not Calico, right? If we're in the realm of like abstract tile laying games, and Calico is a really harsh tile laying game that's hyper puzzly and has bad feeling moments, and Cascadia is it's chill, it's relaxing, it's cozy, it's nice. This is Michael Kiesling doing the Cascadia version of those drafting games, right? And Base Azul is the Calico. And for my taste, I really like Base Azul, so I prefer that to Calico. But I actually think that Cascadia is a much better game than Azul Summer Pavillion, because one of the real strengths of Azul is the drafting decisions being dramatic and having tension for me. So does it need to exist in the realm of games overall? I'm not sure. Is it a worthy follow-up to Azul that gives you something that's Azul, that's something for people who maybe didn't like Base Azul? I think so. Is that what a reimplementation or a sequel should do? I'm not sure. And I think we should talk about that.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. I mean, for me, it's a less successful game. But even though, as I said, I've been very critical of this game throughout, it's still totally pleasant, completely pleasurable to play. I owned it for a bit, had fun playing it with my wife. I, moved on from it because I decided I don't need to keep this and Azul in my collection. But, if somebody was interested in playing a less competitive game and wanted to play this with me, hell yeah, I'm down. I don't think I've ever had a bad time with this game at all. So it feels like a very worthy, like 6. I'm not bringing out, but I'm not turning it down either. I could, and I think a part of it is just suffers the comparison, right? This is like across media, it's a problem with sequels, is people will like compare it to the original. And if the original is like, a near perfect game, at least in my opinion, it's going to be difficult to, be as good. But I think this is doing something different, providing something different that some people are absolutely going to like more. And and it still feels like Azul, because I think it keeps the like very core Azul mechanism of those like factory tiles. It's like a unique drafting mechanism. Yeah. That's still I'm gonna mix metaphors terribly here. Like in are
you gonna talk about calzones?
I was gonna talk about like in Master Chef, right? And Gordon Ramsay's like, what's the hero ingredient? Like this still has like Azul's hero ingredient of that like drafting mechanism. That's still like the star of the show here. So yeah, it makes sense. Like it's a the product is a very great product. It's just not.
I made a Mario game with no
jumping.
Yeah, this is still a Mario sequel with jumping. It's just a way different one. Yeah. To mix metaphors again.
Holy cow.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the real question here in some ways is, if this is a reimplementation of Base Azul, if it's a sequel, for us, it's a successful one as fans of Base Azul. For you owned it and sold it. So I would say no, but it's maybe, when you get to your sequel number 3, you stop thinking about making things for the fans and you start thinking about making things for the people who want to enjoy it but can't for X reason. And maybe it's a good third sequel for that reason.
Yeah, and I mean, and here's the thing too, like, is this game, because I mean, we can look at the reimplementation sequel thing from so many different angles. Like, it is good that a softer Azul exists, I think, for people who, want to experience the like Azul style drafting mechanisms, but don't want the cutthroat, take that nature. That's just like, you can't play Base Azul friend with kids' gloves. Like it just, the game is not designed in that way. So we can say on one hand, yes, this is good that this exists, but we can also be critical and say like, could a softer, friendlier Azul exist in a better version? Like, is Azul Summer Pavillion the best possible version of that? And I think to that question, I would say probably not.
What do you
Because I think
wish?
there are some real problems with the game.
So if we step back and we sort of say, okay, if speculating, we're not Michael Kiesling, but looking at the game, taking our our experience as players, thinking about it critically, this thesis of Azul Summer Pavilion is a response to the criticism of the harshness. This is supposed to be a softer Azul. Where do you feel like the decision space goes awry for you, Jake, in terms of you there? I know there are games that you like that have that sort of softer feel, though I think you tend to enjoy games with some harsh edges at times. But taking that sort of to the side, what do you think what do you wish the game did differently to sort of facilitate that? One thing for me with it, okay, so here's some other things that I will say feel keyly Azul to me, in addition to the factory tiles. It's hyper tactical. You're making interesting tactical decisions, turn to turn, round to round. And also, there's not a lot of randomness, even though there's a fair amount of uncertainty, right? A lot of the randomness, it comes in these, it's punctuated randomness, or as the game goes, you have these moments where a bunch of new information gets injected into the system. I said in that voice because I'm kind of mocking ourselves. Listen to episode 47 for more. But you get these injections of randomness that then you can plan, and you can play in that randomness, make interesting decisions, and you have uncertainty about other people's actions. So for me, Azul feels like a fairly high agency game despite being pretty uncertain. And here, I don't know. Are there other key elements of Azul, and how do they stack up, I guess? And then how do you feel like Azul Summer Pavilion in relation to those goes awry?
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of sitting here brainstorming some of the ways that I think, like, where are the failings of this game, sort of.
Yeah.
And I think you nailed it, right? Like, it's not that complicated of a game. So it's you can't play Azul Summer Pavilion and not see the through lines,
Yeah.
right? Because of the key mechanisms and everything you're saying, spot on. I think that if I were, to, like, if Michael Kiesling showed up to my playtest night and was like, give me some feedback on this new design, try and make a softer Azul, I think the big shortfalling for me is the fact that, like, it feels like we're not engaging with other players' boards in the same way. I think there are ways that you can do that without making it take that. Stonemeyer Games is famous for kind of, or maybe not famous for, but one of the things they do a lot is, like, positive player interaction. So there could be a way of, like, maybe, like, even giving tiles to somebody else, right? And then it's like, well, I want to give them the worst possible thing for them, but it's still, like, a boon. And
Sure.
now I'm, like, have to look at their board. So I think something is missing there. And I'm sure people listening to this are just, like, banging the head on their steering wheel, because they're like, of course you still have to look at other people's board if you want to win this game. And I mean, I think that does exist in this game still, but it just feels so much less focused than in base Azul.
Yeah.
So I think that's one area that I feel like could be improved potentially. And then I think the other thing that's just, like, really the major challenge I have with this game is that the draft phase 1 feels not interesting or tense. And I think you can have, like, I think maybe that's just me, like, and if the goal is to have a draft without tension in it, like, maybe there's just, like, that mechanism is, like, not going to feel satisfying to me as a player no matter what. So I mean, that might just be, like, me coming back to that and be like, well, we have to do something to make it so, like, I care about what tiles I'm getting and not just how many.
I think there's a lot of it's really interesting how there's really two wild tile mechanisms in this game, right? There's the mechanism of there are wild colors throughout the rounds in which you can use to fill in the stars of specific colors, but then any color tile can be quote unquote wild that you can add to the center, and that's a lot of flexibility. And
yeah,
go for it.
I do think the center, like, space is kind of, like, bad to go for.
Yeah, so, it's a low value.
Right. Yeah. So it's like in one, yes.
Tell the story.
What story?
The story of us playing and you seeing me trying out, just
New-
filling
oh,
in the center to start,
yeah.
and
I
you
was
be
just-
like doing the nice, like the nice manager thing where you're sort of like, I'm not sure that's the right decision to be making in this situation. What if you tried this?
yeah.
But I wanted to see how it would play.
For
But
sure.
yeah,
No, yeah. And that's how you approach games too. So
yeah,
I just have to like, oh, Brendan's trying some off the wall thing. Like that's not going to work.
yeah. And it didn't.
But yeah.
I
But
will
it
say,
definitely adds flexibility for sure.
yeah.
And you're always going to be, unless the game just goes absurdly perfect for you, like you're always going to be at some point like offloading tiles there.
Yeah. I think for me, Jake, because of those two wild mechanics, meaning whenever you have wild whatever in a game, you're adding more flexibility. So it's pushing away from that rigidity that we were talking about. To me, the problem with that is that the more flexibility a game system has at any given decision point means you can make kind of the same decisions because the game is flexible enough to enable them. So for me, my criticism of Azul Summer Pavilion isn't that it's light and breezy. I like that. It's fun that I love Cascadia. It's a fun sort of mirror version of Base Azul. It's that games end up feeling too similar from play to play because the amount of flexibility doesn't give me things that I have to plan around and bounce off of because I have so many options. I can kind of do the same thing over and over again and do pretty well. Obviously, I take this with a grain of salt because Jake beats me at this game a lot, but Jake's also just really good at games. And I will now pass it to Jake to say if he agrees or not. But I think for me, I wish that games of Azul Summer Pavilion felt more different from play to play in a way that they do for me in Base Azul with less.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. I think
Thank God.
very, very, yeah. I mean, and that is like the crux of my challenge with the game.
Yeah.
Like, what happens when you have a game that doesn't have like tense and exciting moments? It just makes everything feel flat. And we've talked a lot about that on this game, how, games that like provide like moments where everything's lining up and you get like a jackpot. I think Azul tries to do that. Azul Summer Pavilion tries to do that with the bonuses, where it's like, yeah, I've surrounded this piece and now I get like 2 tiles. But you're kind of always accomplishing more or less the same amount of bonus pieces. Brendan, you gonna say something?
Yes. Okay, no, finish your point, and then I have to get this out.
Yeah, I mean that was pretty much the end of my point.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
you're getting bonus tiles, but it's just more tiles. They're all the same, and then it doesn't really change much, and you're not really separating yourself from other players because they're also doing the same amount of that.
Here's the other huge problem with the bonus tile system. Okay, one, bonus systems are fun when they're surprises, right? The fun of doing bonuses in Ganchan's Clever and like comboing all these actions together is that you don't know what's going to happen until the turn it happens, or you have a bunch of anticipation about, I hope I get this number, because if I do this, I can do that, and then I can do this, and I can do that, but it's I hope I get this number. In Azul Summer Pavilion, you're oftentimes, like Jake said, because of the amount of planning, you're going to get the bonus, and it's just usually, am I going to get the tiles I want? And it's because the tiles that you might get matter less, it's just not exciting. It's like, go to the casino, Jake, and if you pull this the 5th time, you're going to get a jackpot. The sensation of getting that jackpot is so diminished when you know it's coming to if you just sit down to play the slots and you don't know when it happens and you get a jackpot, right? Azul Summer Pavilion tries to do jackpots, but it tells you, okay, you're going to have strategic planning, and on the 5th pull, you're going to get a jackpot. You got a jackpot. Wow. Right? And it's like, oh, I wish you wouldn't have told me that.
Yeah. Because the game is like also telling you to do well at this game, you have to make sure you're like thinking ahead and planning out exactly when you're going to get your jackpot. I think a different way that kind of gave me an idea for like a different way that you see that kind of mechanism in games. I just played on Monday. So yesterday I played Wonderland's War for the first time. I tried that out. And that game has like a personal player board that you can put tiles onto. And if you surround certain spaces with the kind of tiles, the chips that you're putting on there, you get bonuses. But you have to like choose which bonuses to go for, and they're different. So by
Yeah.
going for one, I'm foregoing something else.
Mm.
And here, all the bonuses are exactly the same anywhere on your board.
Yeah.
So that's like an opportunity where like there could have been interesting trade-offs.
Or randomized setup or
Right,
something.
or
Yeah.
something that and because of the way the board laid out, if I was like really, wanting to prioritize one, maybe that's something that also could make me more excited about getting certain colored
Yeah.
tiles in a given round or whatever. Like I'm really trying to get this bonus early because that's gonna be a passive benefit that's gonna like fuel my strategy.
Yeah.
That's something that I think could have been really interesting. I mean, there's always trade-offs, right? That would make the game much more complex to teach, and that's something clearly that the design was trying to stay away from too. But yeah, the bonuses not very exciting.
Yeah. I think that some of it's interesting because, you know, with the shape of the tiles in Azul guides the design in some ways, right? In base Azul, you have square tiles, so you get a grid that you place those tiles onto. So then design what process wise, I can imagine, okay, I want to do a different shape. I'm going to do diamonds. Okay. Diamonds can be tessellated, combined into stars. So this is what a board might look like for that. Okay, there need to be 6 colors, right? You get these like forced decisions in design.
Oh yeah, you were going to talk about the colors and how
that
you
feel
don't like
less
that.
intentional. Well, I just think like it just feels like more for more sake. Like you get more colors, so you care less about what you're drafting because you have all these wilds. And then the difference between drafting red and purple, or excuse me, purple and green, because the wild spaces are functionally the same. It doesn't. It's a 2-point difference if you finish purple or you finish green. The rounds matter slightly, so that can impact. But in base Azul, you really think about the colors that you're drafting when you're drafting them and what that is going to mean in terms of the other colored tiles that you're going to take in a way that's completely absent here. So it just feels like more for more sake instead of more to give you more meaningful decisions. And I really wish that I love when sequels or anything, any design can do more with less. And I think that unfortunately, in some ways, Azul Summer Pavillion does less with more.
Dude, yeah, I think that is very well said. So where does that leave us, Brendan, with Azul? Do you have any other final? I actually just thought of one other thing that I wanted to say about the game, just because I didn't think of it earlier, but wanted to mention it. So we talked briefly about like how this game feels samey game to game. It's a small difference, but I think meaningful. In Azul Summer Pavilion, you always know the game will last exactly 6 rounds.
Yeah.
Well, you don't. It is a player determined end game, kind of. Like
usually it's going to be
5, maybe 90% of the game's 5, but it still puts that decision in players' hands. And sometimes players will surprise you. Or maybe you're the person who has the opportunity to end the game, but you're not sure if you're in the lead and think, you want to take the moonshot of extending an extra round. And like having that little bit of uncertainty is also something that adds excitement and tension to the play. That's just missing here, and I think for no good reason. I mean,
Yeah.
you'd have to come up with some end game condition, but could it just be like completing, surrounding all your statues, or I don't know, you know what I mean? Like you could think of something that probably makes the game usually a 6-round game, but perhaps sometimes 5 or sometimes 7. And I think that too would go a long way in adding excitement for,
Yeah.
relatively small rules overhead.
It's a great point that's another way in which base as well has more uncertainty, even if when you're playing it with a group that's really experienced, it's an illusion of uncertainty. Even the illusion of uncertainty can be enough to give the game a little bit more of a tense feel. Yeah. We're going to go on a 20-mile bike ride, Jake. It's going to be 20 miles. Like exactly when we get there, we will stop.
Right.
It's a different thing than sort of saying we're going to go on this route and let's take a turn here and we'll see if when we get home. It's your body experiences it differently.
Or you're like you're in a new place and ask a local for a hike. They're like, yeah, it'll probably take you 90 minutes. You're like, all right, we'll see about that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So I don't know. The other thing about Azul that we haven't touched on because we're decision space and it's just not something we talk about a lot is the presentation of Azul Summer Pavilion is incredible. It's a beautiful game with great components. And in that way, it totally succeeds. It takes what people love about Azul and gives you more. And I think in that way, it's easy to understand in some ways how well received this game was, because for people who want more of that awesome thing, it gives you more of that awesome thing and a little twist. So I think in that way, it's a huge success. And yeah, for me, it doesn't tarnish. Sometimes you can have a sequel that's so bad that it sort of leaves you being like, maybe I didn't really like that thing that much in the first place. But I don't know. It's an 8 for me. I think it's obviously it could be better. I think, Jake, if this game wasn't an Azul game, you might like it more than a 6, maybe a 6.5.
Yeah. And I think it's a game I'll still like maybe even on my own come back to every once in a while. When we first, I mentioned I own this game. I played on the table a bunch, but we came back to it because it was added as a game on Board Game Arena. And like the first play of it, I'm like, why did I sell this game? It's so fun. And it took me a few plays to remember, like, oh, that's why I sold the game.
Oh yeah,
But like just for that kind of like, it is something you love in a slightly different package, and that's something that's fun to exist and revisit from time to time. I have kind of like a final question segment, Brendan, which is this. So we talked about reimplementations over the course of this episode. The last Azul Queen's Garden, I always joke that it's not Azul Queen's Garden because it loses that like core mechanism. It's just a very, very different game, though you might feel it fits in because it has, everything else you said is true. Like it's just a completely tactical game with like beautiful chunky components or whatever. But it's doing something totally different. And it's fun. It's a good game. I really like it. That one I still own. But my question for you is this. If you were re-implementing Azul 5, keeping in mind like where we've gone with the Azul games so far and how this fits like a nice niche, I think it's more successful with re-implementation as Queen's Garden, which is actually kind of a drawback of the game, because if you come into it expecting Azul, you're going to be disappointed and confused. So what would you do if you were over there at Next Move Games and kind of in charge of some of the creative direction for Azul 5? Like, what kind of new ground would you cover?
I think if I was giving the sort of like having a conversation with Michael Kiesling and he was sort of like, which direction do you want me to take the next design? Which I don't even know if that ever is the way the conversations would play out. I think I would say Azul Summer Pavillion or Azul Queen's Garden also has a reputation of being longer. It's a 60 to maybe even beyond 60-minute game. And something for me that's key about Azul is it's quick, it's snappy. I think that lean into the meanness and make it quick, right? Because then you minimize how impactful it is that the game feels mean. I'd love a sort of turbo mean Azul where you're making interesting drafting decisions that has some form of spatial puzzle. I'd love to see an Azul in a shared play space, maybe that's like really mean, right? It's always in a personal play space. Give me something in a shared play space.
That's what I was going to say.
The Azul drafting is mean, is fast, and where you can hit each other and then smile about it. Yeah, shared
like
play space.
The midpoint between like Renature and Azul, another Kiesling game. Wouldn't that be sick?
That'd be awesome. Yeah,
where you're like doing kind of the Azul tile draft and then placing out onto a shared board, doing some kind of like area majority.
Yeah, make it with Kramer and then have area majority.
Yeah, Kramer can do that part.
Yeah, exactly. Beautiful.
But I like your idea too. Azul Duel. How does that not exist? How is that not a product, a 2-player exclusive Azul game?
I mean, get Cathala in here. I mean, half of Bruno Cathala's
that would be
games
awesome.
are drafting games. It'll be amazing. Yeah. Speaking of bonuses,
So honestly, this made me think like Azul not dead. Like I want more Azul games.
Totally.
Okay. It's still got some juice.
I won't buy them all, but I want more to exist.
I want to
see, Azul is the Star Wars of board games.
And I think I think it's in a good place too, where like between the first 3 at least, you definitely don't need all of them. Almost certainly don't need 2 of them, but probably the right one exists for most gamers. Where you can like find the Azul for you.
Yeah. And maybe you need the first one and then another one.
Yeah,
But
it's probably the first one.
it's probably the first one. And that game even has 2 games because the backboard's a totally different game using the same mechanisms, more or less.
Yeah.
Anyway, this was a great episode. Jake, we should talk about reimplementations more. You mentioned Bruno Cathala. We're playing a bunch of 5 tribes. I think we should cover that on the show. I don't know what you think, but there's more fun decision space coming soon. Jake's like, oh, I got to talk about another game I don't like.
No, I would be delighted to talk about 5 tribes. That was one of the games actually like first, I think it might have been like definitely in my first 5 modern board game purchases. So
that's awesome.
Maybe that's why I'm whooping you at that one too, because I played it a ton when I had only like 5 games.
Probably. There's probably other reasons. Okay.
All right.
This has been a good episode.
This has been an awesome episode, Brendan. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're just back from your trip. Great conversation. And we should thank, as always, Hembry for our intro and outro music. Reach out if you want more Decision Space. Check us out on decisionspacepodcast.com. We have a Patreon. Support that if you can. That'd be amazing. And we have a Discord. So yeah, way more discussion happening there all the time, even about this very episode. So, please come in there, tell us how wrong we are about Azul Summer Pavillion and why it actually rocks. But until next week, thanks so much and have fun playing games.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.